Welcome to A Lawyer's Guide to the Galaxy, a podcast about geek culture by lawyers with your hosts, Ben Siders and Kurt Damon.
And welcome back to Lawyer's Guide to the Galaxy, the podcast that asks interesting questions that don't have any answers with your host, Ben Siders. That's me, and the other guy is Kurt Damon.
That's Kurt, guys, and we got from the Enterprise.
We are intellectual property lawyers and certified geeks practicing law in St. Louis, Missouri, here today to talk to you about Public Domain Day 2026, but that's bearing the lead, which is that we are beginning Season 8 of this podcast.
Season 8.
My goodness.
As we just joke from our last episode, we survived longer than Stranger Things.
Yeah, by multiple seasons.
Survived longer than Lost.
Longer than a lot of things. So this is our annual Public Domain Day episode. This is the one where Kirk and I both consistently turn away from the microphone to look at my screen. So,
if we get quiet, that's the reason why.
That's why. We are going to do our annual tradition, kicking off each season since about season 3, I think, of going over some of the more interesting works that are entering the public domain. This is copyright, and one of the weird artifacts of our copyright system is that the copyrights last a long time, and then they enter the public domain after a certain number of years, but they all enter on the first of the year after their last. So some of these actually should have expired on January 1st of last year.
Or at least January 2nd.
But basically get a whole extra year because of when they were published.
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of an amusing thing in many respects to the fact that, like, it's... everything expires on January 1st. I mean, it does make it nice and easy. It allows us to do a podcast episode like this, but it is a weird artifact. Yeah. It is a weird artifact of law.
Like, nothing else works that way.
No, nothing. I mean, patents expired, 20 years from the day.
From the day, whatever it is. And if you get patent term extension, then we add days on.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we're going to go over some of the stuff. If you guys have listened to these episodes for the last few years, you know that we are now finally done with the 1920s, which was an unusually prolific period of time for American art. And we should also say this is in the United States only.
Yep.
Your copyright mileage may vary, and probably does. Mexico, your copyrights last forever. Other places, not so much.
Objects in the mirror may appear larger than...
Yes. So this is the United States only. These works may also have different expiration dates in other places. So let's get started. This is all stuff that was originally published, released, or copyrighted in the 1930, I should say. So we are out of the 20s. The Great Depression has officially begun, and so I'm not surprised to see T.S. Eliot is in here already.
So, statement on American commentary there.
So let's talk books. Kirk and I we were talking the other day, and really before this, kind of informally, and we both felt like there wasn't a ton this year. We were wrong. There is.
Well, there is, but I think they're also not quite as well known of books. I mean, we were commenting about the fact that, we've had some major books come through, Great Gatsby, stuff like that. And a lot of times we've had more than one per year.
Yeah.
This one, it feels like, there's a couple major ones in here, but a lot of them are kind of small, incremental. And the interesting thing about it is, and what we're seeing, I think, even more of, we talked about the stuff having to do with Disney, having to do with some of the other, copyrights that we're running. You're starting to see series where, like, we're either starting the series or part of the way through the series. And so you're getting this kind of weird thing where, okay, part of it's now going to be in copyright and part of it's not.
Which is kind of a version of the Mickey Mouse problem. I guess we'll get to that in due course. So let's go over the first one. Number one, and this all comes from the Duke Law Center for the Study of the Public Domain. If you listen to NPR or watch CBS News, they are frequently interviewed by major news outlets at the beginning of the year to talk about this stuff. So you may already know some of this. But book number one on their list, William Faulkner, As I Lay Dying.
Okay, that's a substantial piece of literature.
Now, I've never read it. Faulkner I took a class on the literature and culture of the 1920s. This is obviously now after that. So I had read a lot of what was in the public domain before. I have read very little from the 1930s.
Yeah, I can say in conjunction with it, it's, a lot of the literature from this time never interested me, not being an English major, not being involved, sort of in studying literature.
Well, it's kind of a miserable period of time. Like, we're going to have the Grapes of Wrath coming up probably in a couple of years and stuff like that. So it'd be interesting to see what's on here. I couldn't tell you really a lot of what was published in the 30s. I'm sure I know. I just don't realize that that's where it's from.
Yeah, and that kind of thing. And I think it's the other problem. But again, for me, as to what it is this was an era the same way. I never read anything from this just because it was an era I tended to avoid.
Yes.
And I didn't have to read nearly as much literature, so I tended to be able to pick and choose a little bit more what I was going to.
Yeah, and so Faulkner, I mean, Faulkner's a tough read anyway. For those of you who don't know, he's from Mississippi, I think, but a lot of his stuff was written from this kind of, I don't know how to describe it, kind of this stark Southern writing style, a lot of nostalgia from the past. You got to remember 1930, there are still people alive who fought in the Civil War. So there's a lot of kind of ongoing misplaced nostalgia for the past, particularly in the South, which is still, economically, it's like East and West Germany, very far behind the North in terms of economic development. And so there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, and again, I can't speak to it just because I never really read Faulkner at all. It was more just I knew by name. Again, I know that if I was to say like what can I name from Faulkner, Let's Say Lay Dying is probably number 2 of the ones I could actually name.
The Sound and the Fury is always the one people know
yeah.
the most. Well, all of his titles came from other literature. So The Sound and the Fury is from Macbeth, I think, and As I Lay Dying, I believe, is a line from the Odyssey. So a lot of his stuff has that structure. Number 2, Dashiell Hammett, The Maltese Falcon, the original.
It's the book version.
The book version, yeah.
So never read it.
Yeah,
never read the book. Did see the movie. It's actually, I would have to say, I think The Maltese Falcon is one of my favorite older movies.
This is Sam Spade, right?
Yeah.
This one has a special place in copyright legal history.
It does have a special space.
Not the book, but the film does.
Well, the book does.
I guess the book does too. Right.
What it is, because arguably we have our first character copyright in Sam Spade, because actually the seminal case on character copyright involves Sam Spade and involves him from the Maltese Falcon, and whether or not the book adequately describes him for him to be described as he's shown in the movie. And the court found in that case said no. So that was one of the things that's interesting.
Intuitively makes sense to me. Like describing a character in a book is probably going to be hard to do with enough specificity that somebody could say you've infringed the copyright to the character in the book by portraying the same character visually. Yeah,
now interesting to say portraying the same character in the same work. But it's one of those things that I think is really intriguing about it is the fact that the court basically said that, but most people have said that's been, in some respects, discredited. The case has kind of gone by the wayside because there's kind of a recognition that no, you really can't have the same character.
It feels like we've broadened that up a lot.
Yeah. But it is kind of a major thing because it's really the first character copyright case, and it finds the opposite direction from the way most character copyright nowadays files. I also think it's interesting that it's just Sam Spade, because there's quite a lot of sort of archetypal stuff in the Maltese Falcon. I mean, the Maltese Falcon itself, and so it's kind of an intriguing, sort of thing.
One of the most famous MacGuffins, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Probably the most famous MacGuffin, I would argue, other than MacGuffin.
Okay. Next one, Agatha Christie, The Murder at the Vicarage, the first Miss Marple novel. Now, I've not read any Agatha Christie either.
Yeah, I've never read Agatha Christie, although I recently learned from it that it's the Agatha Christie is the most published female author in existence, if I remember correctly. Wow. And it's
not Danielle Steele or something like that.
No, and actually by the most published author, she's either second or third to the Bible.
She was prolific. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. And, it's by sheer number of works and republications. She's like second or third to the Bible.
We've seen her on this list, I think, every year since we've done it. So.
Yeah, I mean, she had an incredible number of works as to what it was, and they're still incredibly popular today. I mean, I saw Murder on the Orient Express in the last year at the Playhouse.
They're remaking it again. I just saw. So this one's interesting because it's the Sherlock Holmes problem. We've got a character whose personality and story is revealed over the course of a serialized storytelling.
Yep.
So this is the first Miss Marple book. So whatever happens to Marple in this book is now public domain, but the stuff that happens to her later is not. So the book here is public domain. To the extent that the book reveals the character, those aspects are public domain. But just like Mickey Mouse, that doesn't mean the stuff that came out later is.
Now, I think the next one is actually we're talking about the idea of sort of, people who have talking about series. This is probably the most major of any of the series discussions that we're going to have here, but this year at least.
Yeah, Carolyn Keene, the pen name for Mildred Benson, who wrote the first 4 Nancy Drew books, have all entered the public domain this year.
Yeah, so, and interesting enough, this is the thing with it, as I said, it's the first 4. They, of course, all enter on the same day, although obviously they were not all published the same day.
So the first one is The Secret of the Old Clock. Now, I have read some Nancy Drew. I don't remember any of it.
I read it back when I was in middle school and stuff like that.
Same here. I remember reading this.
They were really good. They were fun.
I read this at the same time as The Chronicles of Narnia.
Okay, yeah, I went through a window of kind of being into mysteries. I actually read there was a I can't remember what it is right now. The Something 5, which is sort of the British version of like the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew. I read a bunch of those, and because of it, started reading Hardy Boys. And then bumped into Nancy Drew and read some Nancy Drew. And I was I enjoyed them. I would say I enjoyed the Hardy Boys a little bit more because Hardy Boys tend to have a little more horror aspect to their mysteries than the Nancy Drew did. But I always found them to be just kind of interesting books. The problem I bumped into was there's just so dang many of them that I kind of lost interest in it and stuff like that. But this is one where I would say, from what I recall about it, I don't think Nancy Drew changed a lot during the course of the series. There's obviously be characters introduced. There's going to be aspects of the personality based on stuff that happened in prior books. But I don't know this for a fact, but I don't think the books are terribly self-referential. I don't think you need to read them in order. I think they're kind of all standalone. So you don't have the issue of like something the character knows in a later novel they wouldn't have known in the first one.
So it's more like a syndication model for the narrative.
Yeah, I could be wrong about that. Somebody who's into Nancy Drew can definitely feel free to sort of write in and correct me on that.
Let us know.
But to me, I think it's an interesting idea if that's true, that really you kind of have sort of a syndicated type model of books. What have we lost in Nancy Drew? What does that do to a character copyright where we kind of have a much more similar character with, 4 books? I don't say there's 90. I mean, there's a lot of Nancy Drew books. What does that do to the character? Because we've got most of the books are not yet in public domain, but the core ones are. So how do we see that affecting a character copyright? What can you and can't you do with Nancy Drew?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say we've got a Nancy Drew movie next year.
Oh, I think we're going to see without any question see a Nancy Drew movie. That is. I have heard rumors there's apparently a Nancy Drew video game coming too, so I don't know if that's something being licensed. We'll see where that goes.
Next one, The Little Engine That Could by Waddy Piper, which I just learned is a pen name for a guy named Arnold Monk. I don't ever remember knowing who actually wrote that, but that is, of course, a book all of us had growing up, at least Americans did. Which I actually read it to my kids. I got a copy, like the original, because they sanitized it later. Because in the original, they're like transporting jackknives and all kinds of as toys for kids, which, in the 1930s maybe makes more sense. They changed it to something else, and everybody rioted, and so they re-released the original. And I read that to my kids. I remember thinking, this book is way more brilliant than I recognized when I was a kid, because one, The Little Engine That Could is like a shunt train for a yard. It's not like an actual locomotive, and it has to go over this hill. So that's something that you would know in 1930 that I did not in 1982 when I was having this read to me. And then the whole "I think I can" thing is the cadence of it is the chugging, right? Yeah. It's the cycle of a steam locomotive, which you also don't know in the 80s. So
actually, one of the things I knew at the time, though, amusingly enough, I had the Little Engine That Could board game.
I didn't know there was such a thing.
Remembers that? I mean, it had one of those vacuum formed little engines, and that was the piece that had to move. And the whole point was, could you get over the hill? That was the trick.
The rest on this list are a bunch of authors I know, and I've read some stuff by some of them, but none of these works am I familiar with. So one that jumps out is Noel Coward, Private Lives. I've heard of Noel Coward. I want to say he's an English author. But I don't remember Private Lives, and I don't know that I've read anything.
I've actually heard of Private Lives, but again, I couldn't say I know anything about it.
T.S. Eliot, Ash Wednesday. The only Eliot thing I've read is the love song of Proof Rock. Yeah. So I read that, and then I take The Wasteland. I read The Wasteland too. Okay. But of course we love T.S. Eliot here because he's from St. Louis. So, Evelyn Waugh, Vile Bodies. I've heard of Waugh, don't know that one. John Dos Passos, 42nd Parallel. So that's part of the USA trilogy, and that's everything I know about it. And I've never read it. I don't even know what kind of work it is. Edna Ferber, Cimarron. Again, that one also has a movie version that came out the same year, so we'll get to that in a second. Another one I've heard of and couldn't tell you anything about it. And then Dorothy Sayers, a name I recognize. J.B. Priestley, a name I recognize. Sigmund Freud, Civilization and Its Discontents, or in German.
No, it is in German. It's the German version again.
Das Überhagen Interkultur.
Das Überhagen Interkultur.
Yeah, Kirk's German's better than mine.
My accent was terrible there. Sorry.
So we got some Freud. We've got what else is in here? Bertrand Russell, another Englishman. It's a lot of. I would say they're lesser works, so much as lesser known works, at least to us. Yeah, a lot of names I recognize, but none of these works.
I would say they're not household name books. Yeah. That's it. These are obviously they're. I
mean, T.S. Eliot, you probably
read them, but I'm not sure you've heard of T.S. Eliot's Ash Wednesday.
No, I've never have until I saw this list.
And so, yeah, I think the thing we really get with this, that was sort of our comment, is you're just not seeing the big household. Everybody's read them in school books, like The Great Gatsby, to pick up The Great Gatsby.
Yeah, the stuff everybody not only knows, but has probably been forced to read at some point during their primary education.
Or had the opportunity to be forced to read, and they have been forced to read something else.
Or were told to read, didn't, and lied about it, yeah. So, interesting stuff. We'll continue to kind of monitor as we do these episodes each year how the I don't know, the familiarity we have with the list. Like, you and I are probably more familiar than the average person because we're literature nerds.
Sort of.
I majored in English, but
he's a literature nerd.
Even so, like, a lot of the stuff I just don't know. So, okay, moving on. Characters in cartoons. This list has
This is the really interesting one, I think.
3 really great, interesting entries. So this is, again, cartoons, comics, and characters. Number 1, Betty Boop.
Betty Boop, I think, is really interesting in this because, again, we have the same Mickey Mouse problem. Betty Boop has been around forever,
but never really changed.
Never's really changed. That's the thing. And you were just joking about the joke.
And who framed Roger Rabbit? She's still the same, and she's in black and white, and she comments on it.
And it's one of those things where I'm like, she's a very, very recognizable character immediately, and also one that I'd say is very commercially successable in recent times.
To this
you still
day,
see her, on a lot of things. This is a really interesting one. Is exactly what's going to happen
Simple,
with Betty Boop.
Timeless design, kind of a holdover of the flapper era. Really interesting character that is still monetizable today. But we're going to see her start to fall into the public domain as well. They list 4 different works here: Dizzy Dishes, Barnacle Bill, Accordion Joe, and Mysterious Mose. Not familiar with any of those, but
I've never actually seen any Betty Boop movies or works.
I'm not sure that I have either. I don't know how I even know who she is.
She just pervades
just
popular
in the
culture.
zeitgeist, right?
She pervades popular culture.
The next up is a character named Rover from a film called The Chain Gang.
Actually, he wasn't named that. It's the picnic where he's named.
Chain Gang,
he just appears.
The character appears in a work called The Chain Gang, and then later in 1930 in a work called The Picnic, named Rover. You know this character. He later got renamed to Pluto, Mickey Mouse's dog.
Yeah. Now, the other thing I think is interesting about this is we don't have him named Pluto in any of these. So arguably his name of Pluto cannot yet be used, even though his appearance can.
And even though the name should not be copyrighted, but of course, practically speaking, if you say it's Pluto, then you're asking for trouble.
But he doesn't have the name Pluto
Doesn't have it yet, right? So... Okay, and then the next one that I mean, Kirk and I were both surprised by this: Blondie and Dagwood from the comic Blondie. Isn't that still being published?
Yeah, it is. And I was amazed it was that old. I had no idea it was that old.
That one blew my mind. I mean, I read Blondie strips growing up every Sunday morning. We got the paper.
Last Sunday.
my dad would take the sports section. He'd hand me the comic section, and I read all the comics, and I always read Blondie and Dagwood.
Yeah, I mean, I literally read it last Sunday. I mean, the thing because it appears in the paper.
Okay, so that's going to have the same problem as all the rest. Not the problem, but the same facet as all the rest of these, where, whatever was in the comic strips released that year is public domain, and whatever comes afterwards is not.
Yeah, and now we've got the same with the Mickey Mouse, where it's now over 100 years of continuous release. So again, Betty Boop arguably not having not changed doesn't have sort of the same kind of issues, but Blondie and Dagwood have changed a little bit over time.
Although now that I think about it, Dagwood did kind of look like a 1930s era,
he always did.
Bourbon and cigars guy.
Yeah.
So, and then we have a whole bunch of new Mickey Mouse films, 9 new cartoons, the first week of Mickey Mouse comic strips, something called Silly Symphonies. I don't know what that is, but
I know Silly Symphonies.
Lots more Disney content falling into the public domain, but covering existing characters. So nothing earth-shatteringly new from Disney other than pseudo Pluto, sort of primitive Pluto.
Yeah, and I think the real key to it is it's Pluto's appearance, which I don't think changed radically during the course of it.
Right.
But not being called Pluto is an intriguing thing.
That is interesting.
And definitely probably not being Mickey Mouse's dog, I don't believe either. I'm told.
No, he appears just as an unnamed bloodhound, so I guess we know what kind of dog Pluto is now, too.
So, I think, he always did the whole sort of sniffing on the ground type thing like a bloodhound.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's interesting to see is exactly what's going to happen with that.
Okay, moving on to films. This one's going to be similar to the novels, where there's lots of stuff you've heard of and probably have never seen, including our first entry, the film version of All Quiet on the Western Front, which won the Academy Award.
Yeah, and we had an All Quiet on the Western Front book.
Yep.
Either last year or the year before.
It was a while ago.
It
was sometime after World War I, but before now.
Yeah, obviously. We now have the movie, and the sort of the movie everybody associates, I think, with it being a movie. There's like more recent movies and stuff like that, but this is the original did win the Academy Award. Obviously a major piece of film history. So.
King of Jazz, a John Murray Anderson musical featuring Paul Whiteman and Bing Crosby's first feature film appearance.
Yep.
Never seen it.
Nope, I've ever seen it.
All right, we have Cimarron, also won the Best Picture, but not until the next year. It only appears. It was released in 1931, but at the time, copyright was based on registration date, and this was registered in 1930.
Yep.
So, okay.
So you're thinking about that, and again, that's when I recognize the name, but I just don't know anything about it.
Animal Crackers, a Marx film.
That I actually
everybody's heard of. Yeah, Animal Crackers.
I actually studied that in film class, so I remember Animal Crackers.
This one's interesting. Soup to Nuts. I love this. I'm not familiar with it. It says it features later members of the Three Stooges. I just love that the screenwriter is Rube Goldberg.
Isn't that kind of great? Yeah.
We've got some German stuff by Joseph von Sternberg. We've got, Greta Garbo's first talking role in Anna Christie. We've got a Howard Hughes film.
Jean Harlow's film
debut in Hell's Angels.
Yep.
We got a Hitchcock film, Murder. Salvador Dali wrote a film that I can't pronounce. It looks like it's French, L'Age d'Or. I'm going to screw that one up. And we've got Buster Keaton's first speaking role in Free and Easy. So lots of films that are historically important and mark a lot of firsts, but probably nothing most people have heard of.
Yeah,
including Kirk, who knows a lot more about this.
I would say a lot of these are film studies, films.
Kind of like the novels, the stuff that I've heard of, but don't know intimately.
And again, Alfred Hitchcock early. It's Murder. From Alfred Hitchcock. That's an early Hitchcock. I'm not sure if you've actually ever seen it.
Yeah, when I think of Hitchcock, I think of much later stuff.
Yeah. And things along those lines. I would say a lot of these. I happen to know Hell's Angels, again, just because of Jean Harlow. Things like that. It's interesting to see what's coming out. The only one on this I would say I really know is All Quiet on the Western Front and Animal Crackers.
I'm not sure that I've seen either of those. I've probably seen clips from Animal Crackers.
Yeah. I've seen All Quiet on the Western Front. I analyzed Animal Crackers back in the day because that was the one we did as the Marx Brothers. We actually did it to study the Marx Brothers and the way they did comedy and stuff like that. And quite frankly, I think it is a better Marx Brothers film. So I think it is one of their better ones, quite frankly. It holds up well as still being funny.
Which is not much that does for that time period. Okay, music. And again, this is a musical composition, so this would be the song in the abstract and not necessarily any given recording, which is covered by a separate copyright. There's some good stuff here. We have a bunch of Gershwin music, and I think we talked before about how the Gershwins were... music has more so than film and television and novels been a major driver of copyright term extension, the Gershwins being central to that effort with a Rhapsody in Blue. But here we've got I've Got Rhythm, I've Got a Crush on You, But Not For Me, and Embraceable You, lyrics by Ira Gershwin, music by George Gershwin, all entering the public domain. But the next one's the one I find the most interesting, Georgia on My Mind.
Yeah, one I think most people know.
I didn't know this was that old.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always think of the who's did the famous recording of that. Oh gosh, there's like a I'm forgetting now, but yeah, there's a lot of people have covered Nelson? That. That may have been. Dream a Little Dream of Me. Also did not realize that this was that old. Yeah. This one's been covered a million times. They made a movie out of it in the 80s. I think I think the Mamas and the Papas probably have the most well-known cover, so that's been done a million times. On the Sunny Side of the Street, didn't know that was this old. I guess I probably should have.
I kind of know that one was that old. I wouldn't have necessarily placed it in 1930, but I knew it was very old.
Body and Soul, that's one that I recognize, and a couple more in here.
Yeah, You're Driving Me Crazy is one I know.
Yeah, Walter Donaldson. This one's worth mentioning. Beyond the Blue Horizon, which I had never heard of. Oh, yeah. Lyrics by Leo Root Robin, who I have heard of. But it says here in the parenthetical, it's the possible inspiration for the Star Trek theme song.
Yeah, I heard that actually.
Okay, so I got to listen to this now and find out what it is. So
the other one worth is the Royal Welsh Fusiliers had John Philip Sousa March.
Oh yeah,
and that's definitely worth noting.
Yes, Sousa of Sousaphone.
Yep, which I play.
So Kurt was a Sousaphone player. So. Some interesting stuff there. A lot of works that I'm not familiar with intimately. We may have homework though to do to go listen to Beyond the Blue Horizons and see if we can pick out the Star Trek elements in it. Sound recording. So sound recordings are weird because one, it's a separate copyright from the song. The song copyright is owned by the songwriter. The sound recording copyright is owned by the performer, although in practice it's owned by the music label. But barring that, the performer would usually own it. So it's a separate copyright. And so here we've got the one I find most interesting is the St. Louis Blues, recorded by Bessie Smith, featuring Louis Armstrong.
Yep. Isn't that one of Louis Armstrong's first?
I think it probably was.
I'm not certain about that, but I have the feeling that's one of Louis Armstrong's first, big recordings.
Yeah, it would not surprise me. The rest, Sweet Georgia Brown, I've heard of. I think we actually played that when I was in band. And then Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Seen. Didn't know that was this old. I keep saying that, but it's true. Yes, Sir, That's My Baby. So there's a lot of sort of ragtime, kind of early, probably still pre-rhythm and blues here, but it's that era, and we're entering the Great Depression, so people are about to get not happy, and really the blues are probably going to become prominent.
Yeah, the blues.
Kind of fall out of the jazz era and lean more into the blues. There's still a lot of jazzy stuff in here, though. Yep. All right, and then the last category is art. Art is one of the trickiest ones because we've already talked about art, right? We've talked about comics and film and TV, but this is visual art, which is unique because it's really hard to figure out when its copyright would start to run. A lot of this art doesn't become public knowledge for sometimes years after it's produced. And we don't, unlike these other things, because like there's no mainstream distribution for.
Well, it's a single work. It's not like it's
it winds up in a museum or something, or it gets bought by a collector, or it's a commissioned work, and so it's not like television or movies where there's a widespread, well publicized, with good documentation and record keeping release that you can track. Our art doesn't work that way, so it's a lot harder to track when it was. Most of these works,
some of it I believe is registration. I mean, that's
a lot of that comes from. The only one here I recognize is a Pete Mondrain composition with red, blue, and yellow. Well, I'll see if I can. Now that we can, I'll maybe make that the cover for this episode. But like,
it's no longer copyrighted.
The minute it popped up here, I was like, oh, I have seen that before a million times. It kind of has like a late '80s, early '90s. Like when I see it, I think Saved by the Bell. Like. Okay. It's this kind of I don't know. You guys check it out when we publish this, but it's very recognizable, and it's an art aesthetic that seems a little out of place for this time period, and I think has remained popular since.
Yeah, it is. I'd say a little bit more modern art. Interesting enough, so on the Duke site, they're flashing up the pictures of these. One in here is the Sophie Tower art composition of circles and overlapping angles. I recognize the pictures popping up here, but I never would have known artist or name. From it, when I see it, I'm like, okay, I recognize that as an image of artwork.
I don't recognize any of these other than Pete Mondrain. We got Theo von Doesburg. How do you pronounce that? Jose Clemente Orozco. So a lot of these are, and maybe it's because art in this time period is kind of fading. It's being replaced by radio and film, and I guess television's still coming.
And I think also you have the thing, we're headed into the Great Depression, so these are artworks that are going to be in museums, if at all. Yeah. These are not going to be sold for a lot of these cases probably.
One thing that's interesting that we haven't seen much of yet is any photography. Not a lot of famous photography entering the public domain in these.
Well, we're not really there yet. I mean, that's we kind of need a little bit more time to get photography to really come into its own.
Yeah. There aren't a lot of, I think, commercially valuable photographs, but we're going to have some. There's the famous photo of the woman sitting on the steps in the Great Depression. So I think those are coming in the next couple of years.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, and again,
we're going to get a lot of valuable World War II photography from media reporting and things like that.
I think that's what we're really going to get we got to get to World War II when sort of photography becomes really ubiquitous because of World War II.
Yeah, and we're still a decade away.
Yeah. And stuff like that. And we're really just headed into the Depression. And what we're going to see for photography is going to be news pictures that have become, they become famous because of their association with the Depression.
Yep.
As news photos. The one I mean to think of is the famous with the guy with the foot on the front of the car with the "Buy This Car."
Yeah.
Stuff like that. That's a famous the soup lines.
There's the one with the woman that puts a sign out, "Children for sale." There's a lot of those coming, and it'd be interesting. Maybe it just occurred to me is the Great Depression like the first sort of historical tragedy that was recorded photographically.
I mean, arguably, because World War I really wasn't.
Right? Like, there's some photos, not a lot.
Yeah.
I've seen some like colorized photographs of like the French army with their ridiculous blue uniforms. What a terrible idea.
Well, and then arguably when you get back as soon as you're out. I mean, obviously we had photography before then, but it was so slow.
Yeah.
They couldn't do
slow.
A lot
exposure times were long. And was it really possible to take that kind of expensive, sensitive equipment into combat zones and things like that? So I'll bet we see over the next decade a lot more photography showing up. on this list.
Things we know and stuff like that. And again, I think it's going to become associated with primarily news photography associated with the Depression.
It may also be that a lot of it, people didn't really consider it copyrightable. And so a lot of it probably wasn't registered and maintained over the years.
Actually, another one, just thinking about it, I don't know what the timing of it is. When did the Pulitzer Prize come out?
I think that's this time period.
Yeah,
I think it's out
here
by then.
now, and that's the thing. So we've got that. That's going to be obviously become important.
I want to say that Faulkner book. I think As I Lay Dying won the Pulitzer.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
But I think there is obviously a Pulitzer for photography, if I remember correctly, and for news reporting. So the idea of that we start seeing
if it was at the time, the price has changed over the years. But
I'm wondering if maybe that's where we also see some of these photos becoming more known, is because they get recognized.
Yep, absolutely. All right. So it's always important to point out that just because the works that are entering the public domain here are the works as they were published at this time.
Yeah.
That does not mean that the version that you bought for your English composition class in 1991 that it's the same version. It is not unusual for publishers to make small variations to catch people cutting and pasting when they're not supposed to. And those also often include prologues, afterwards, analysis, articles, annotations, footnotes, and all kinds of other things to make it so that there is some copyright in some part of it, so you can't just copy it wholesale. So be careful. Proceed with caution.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the always issue is exactly, making sure you actually have the public domain work. In some cases, it's easier than others. This is what you see with
I think it's particularly pernicious with audiovisual and sound recordings, because the recordings can be remastered. Well, the remastered version, new copyright.
And obviously re-recorded also by somebody else.
New copyright.
So even the comment about the music composition versus the music recording, that those may not be the same year.
Yeah.
So when we say, hey, this music composition's out, that doesn't mean any recording of it is actually in public domain. There may be no recordings in public domain. It just means you can get a hold of the sheet music and play it.
Yeah. And bear in mind too, different editions over the years. A lot of these books get re-released in subsequent editions or editors' special editions, things like that. So
actually, I was just recently listening to other podcasts, and actually one of them that, for anybody who's interested, it was in the Freakonomics podcast, if I remember correctly. They were talking about Handel's Messiah, and I had no idea how many revisions of Handel's Messiah there were. There's literally like 40. And it was like, okay, I had no idea there were that many different versions, and stuff like that. And so it was like, okay, that's, you bump into stuff like that in conjunction with music. So,
well, it's going to be also complicated because we're getting into so many different works that involve characters that in some cases are still being developed to this day. So knowing what you can safely do.
Arguably Sam Spade.
I mean, well, this is just copyright too. Like Mickey Mouse still has trademarks. It's not just a simple matter of I'm going to go make my own Mickey Mouse film. There is still a trademark that is still valid and enforceable.
Yeah, it is. It's a very interesting thing around it, and we're going to start seeing, I think, more and more of the characters. We're going to see the real development of the character copyright, much more so than I think we had before then. A lot of which is character copyright in many respects built around film.
Yeah.
As much as we say, like, hey, it's the Maltese Falcon book was sort of what the core of the original character copyright. The Maltese Falcon film is why we all cared. And so it's interesting because I think a lot of character copyright is built around the film industry because you now had visual depictions of what these characters were. And again, that goes to the original Maltese Falcon case and the facts of that case. But we're now seeing that that's just becoming more and more common with animation, with drawn characters, where it's not just an actor playing somebody, it's a character that's invented out of whole cloth and drawn. We're right in that era. We're in the beginning of that era. We're at least a few years in now. We're past Disney, we're past initial Mickey Mouse or Steamboat Willie. But we're just seeing like all these kind of, iconic old characters coming into play.
Kind of sneaking in almost. Like Betty Boop and Dagwood and Blondie were not on my radar for 1930. We would be remiss. Let's talk about this briefly. Last year was Mickey Mouse. As I recall,
a couple years ago.
Recently, Mickey Mouse, Winnie the Pooh before that. So we've seen some of this stuff sneaking in. Films are being made. People are doing things with it. There's all kinds of YouTube content featuring the Steamboat Willie version. As we were approaching this deadline, I saw a lot of people who were almost entirely non-lawyers making broad prognosticating predictions about how, it's never going to happen. Disney's going to step in and extend copyright again. Now, you and I had an in-depth conversation off the record with a lobbyist in the 1930s about how the copyright extension got done. And as I recall, he told us that Disney wanted nothing to do with it. It had to be dragged along kicking and screaming. screaming because they knew they'd get blamed for it.
But I think it's hilarious, actually.
Yeah. That doesn't entirely square with the public perception of what happened. And I'm pretty sure Disney did have lobbyists involved, but they weren't really involved with this effort, at least. And as far as I know, they had no interest at all in extending this any further, which didn't surprise me. And as far as I know, there's been no real hot litigation or any vitriolic dispute over the public domain uses of Steamboat Willie so far.
Well, the other thing with it is, quite frankly, when you think about it, the sheer number of films that have come out. Now, yes, they're relatively low budget, small grade films, but there's a lot of horror films primarily that have come out involving Steamboat Willie, involving Winnie the Pooh, involving these characters that are now in the public domain. This is what you're supposed to happen, know, and yes, they're low budget, things like that, but they're creative, and they're interesting, and it's adding to sort of the work that's out there. That's the whole reason we do, like we said, a Celebrate Public Domain Day.
There's a lot of, we're doing this now because we can going on. And so the quality of what you get is what you'd expect from the mindset of people who are doing this just because they can and trying to be as offensive and as possible.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that happening, which is fine. Okay, the edgelords are going to edgelord. It's fine. But Disney doesn't seem to care. One, what can they do if it's done correctly? It's public domain. That's Hornbook law. So there's nothing you can do about that. But even to the extent somebody maybe is stepping over lines, they don't seem interested in testing these waters. I guess I don't blame them, because let's say somebody inadvertently grabbed a couple of images from a 1931 Mickey Mouse film. What are Disney's damages?
Yeah, you're gonna have all sorts of issues and stuff like that.
Like as it is, we're going through this, and most, Kirk and I know this stuff better than a lot of people, and we haven't heard of 95% of it. So what's Disney making off of some other obscure Mickey Mouse cartoon? We didn't even name what they were here. This list doesn't even name what they were. There are 8 of them, right? So what are your damages? And this, to me, this goes back to so much of copyright infringement, of everyday copyright infringement, goes unchecked for practical reasons. Not that you couldn't sue somebody, but there's just nothing to be gained in doing that. It's a huge waste of time and money. And so we just let it go. And there's a whole school of legal thought called economic breach or economic infringement, where we say, you know what?
My contracts class was entirely on it.
Oh, yeah. The law and economics Chicago school guys are really big on that. And the idea is just, the law is there to mediate disputes. And so you just go forth and do what you're going to do. And if it matters, we'll find out when there's a lawsuit. And in a sense, the entire patent system is kind of built on that.
Copyright system, yeah.
Well, I'm thinking patent in particular. You do a prima facie obviousness analysis, but we don't drain the entire world's pool of knowledge to examine a patent. We do enough to be reasonably sure it's probably valid, and we'll really stress test it in litigation for that 1% of 1%.
We kind of talked about this in conjunction with our Pokemon episodes, and Pokemon. We went through talking about.
You guys loved those, by the way.
Yeah, we were amazed at how much people loved those as episodes, and kind of glad we did them. I have to admit, I enjoyed making those. Those were actually some of the more fun ones I got to research.
You did a lot of research on those, yeah.
It's what it was. I had a lot of fun with the Pokemon episodes, partially because of the fact that I'm a little too old for Pokemon, but my son's into it, and I kind of got into it early with Pokemon Go, and so it was one of those things where I found it intriguing to go and actually sort of investigate, the way the world thinks about the most valuable intellectual property in existence right now.
Yeah.
And so that was it was fun to sort of check through it. But yeah, I think you do get into a lot of just sort of questions of, while we're celebrating this being in the public domain, there's always edge questions. And the thing about it is, if you want to make something with this, you got to make sure you're on the right side of the law or risk something. But at the same time, you also kind of have those. What's really the risk? Is people really going to come after you if it's right on the edge? And, not some area you want to test, because they always could. But you get into those kind of intriguing questions in some respects. And we're going to start seeing, again, I think more and more of this as we're seeing these long-standing serialized type characters,
venerable properties
coming through, and we're going to see more and more of them where the starts are starting to now fall out of copyright, but the ends are far from it.
At this point, still open in a lot of cases. So, all right. So that is Public Domain Day 2026 with a brief diversion into Pokemon. Coming up, we have. Boy, we've got a lot. We are backed up because we were very busy this fall and kind of got off schedule. We've got Star Wars content coming your way. We've got, what else do we have? We've been talking about this.
We've got
there's so much I've forgotten what it is. Oh, we've got our 1980s episode we're going to do.
We got some trademark law cases coming up here. One I think we're going to do.
Yes, there's a lot. We're going to keep an eye on the Pokemon thing, so we'll do a postmortem on that once that goes somewhere. But this has been, and there's more Star Wars content coming to talk about. We haven't gone over Picard yet, which we've seen some of. There's a lot. We're far behind.
It's actually one of the things that's been interesting to me is and I got a kick out of it when same at the end of Stranger Things, and all the people talking about like the science fiction you should be watching now that Stranger Things isn't on anymore, and having no idea what about half of it was, it really kind of amazed me. Is just like, there's all this supposedly good science fiction out there that I've just never heard, I've never seen, stuff like that. And so seeing where is that going to go? What other shows are we going to end up watching? I mean, I bumped into a few random ones. I bumped into a few random movie properties, that I was kind of surprised by. We've talked about a few of those offline, stuff like that. I'm still doing things like catching up on Jurassic World, which
we did see the last one finally.
I have not seen the last one. I just saw the second last one. I just saw Fallen Kingdom, which is, terrible. I
didn't see it.
It is the exact same problem of what they did in between Jurassic Park and Lost World, which was they took a good idea for a plot and they finished it in the first 15 minutes and then made a second plot after it, which was totally unnecessary. And so, that was the thing with it. We really don't need dinosaurs running around the world. We just don't. They can stay on their little island. But, it was that kind of thing with it. And there was stuff like some of the imagery in Fallen Kingdom was fantastic, and I just could not get over the plot. I just couldn't get over it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so painful.
Spoiler alert, you may not be thrilled with the most recent one then.
I knew I wasn't good. I didn't expect to. I didn't expect to like the original Jurassic World, but I did. Actually,
it was a decent soft
movie.
reboot. Anyway, as you can tell, we have a lot to talk about, and we will be getting to all of that and more in Season 8 of A Lawyer's Guide to the Galaxy. Thank you for listening. Make sure you like, rate, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, sing it from the treetops, and
everything else you're supposed to do to get us likes.
All the things. That's all for this time. We'll see you next time. Lauren, play us out.
The views expressed by the participants of this program are their own and do not represent the views of, nor are they endorsed by Lewis Rice LLC, its officers, directors, employees, agents, representatives, shareholders, and subsidiaries. None of the content should be considered legal advice. As always, consult a lawyer. This podcast was produced and recorded in St. Louis, Missouri.